Hello students, this is your lesson for the week of April 27th. We're going to be going over area for trapezoids and triangles. Make sure before you're watching this video that you've watched the videos in the module for this week. These videos are going to be your introduction to the content, and my videos are just simply going over the notes, and it's a quick review of the material. And one thing, the Math Antics video has area of several shapes. If you want to watch it as a review, that's fine, but if you want to fast forward to about 4 minutes and 54 seconds in, that's where you will see the specific information for area of a triangle. So after you've watched those videos, and it will just be two, one for a trapezoid and then choose one for the triangle, you will print out the notes for this video if you can. If you can't, just get a sheet of scratch paper. So if you need to pause and do that, go ahead. Make sure you have something to write with and either the notes printout or a sheet of scratch paper. Okay, I'm going to be going through the notes. It looks just like what you should have printed out, what I have here. And again, if you couldn't print it, you can write this down on paper, draw the shapes just so you have an understanding. So last week we went over area of parallelograms, and remember rectangles are special types of parallelograms, squares are special types of rectangles. This week we're going to do area of triangles and trapezoids. And those shapes come from rectangles. So that's why we went over the rectangles first. So if we look at the rectangle in this picture here, there are some similarities. We should know, hopefully, that rectangles, part of what makes them special is the fact that they have right angles at their corners, just like this triangle does. And we've talked about this in class before. Whenever you see that little box, that is showing you that you have a right angle. So think about how they are similar and how they are different. Rectangles have 4 sides, triangles have 3. What if we drew a line diagonally through that rectangle? Do you see how it makes 2 right triangles? So that is a really important piece of our formula, and I'm going to show you what we should write in the box. So if we're looking at this particular rectangle and triangle, they do have the same base and the same height length, but the triangle would be half of the rectangle, and the video that you should have watched before this illustrated that as well. So go ahead and fill that in your box and pause it if you need extra time to write. And then a statement that you need to remember for your quiz is that a rectangle can always be cut in half to produce 2 equal right triangles. And another word that we use for equal in geometry is congruent. So go ahead and fill in the word congruent next to equal. Congruent means same size and same shape. So if we draw a line through our rectangle, we would get 2 right triangles that would be the exact same size and the exact same shape. And we learned last week that when you find the area of a rectangle, you use the formula base times height. And as it showed you in the video as well, if base times height would give me the whole rectangle, if I just want the triangle here, it would be half of that. So our formula for finding a triangle is very similar to the rectangle formula, except it's half of it. And these are 2 different ways that we could write it. Base times height divided by 2, or 1/2 base times height. Now, if you're working with this formula, this is the one that you'll see on your star sheet. It does not matter which order you multiply in. But if you're working with this formula, if you prefer it this way, you have to multiply the base and the height first before you divide by 2. This one on the right is the most common one that you will see. Okay, now we're going to move on to some practice problems. So we have 3 different triangles here. We have a right triangle, we have what looks like an equilateral triangle, and then a scalene triangle. This one might be isosceles, and those are all types of triangles that you should have learned in 5th grade. So looking at this first one, our formula for each triangle is going to be the same. Area equals 1/2, and excuse my messy writing, times the base times the height. And notice this is a lowercase b, so we're just talking about the base of the two-dimensional shape. Now on this first one, they don't give us the measurements, but there is a grid. Remember, with grids, you're counting spaces. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the base, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the height. And we want to look at the side. So even though the shape doesn't fill up this whole square, the highest point of the triangle goes all the way to the top. So that's why we're going to use 7. And when we plug in those values to our formula, it's going to become area equals 1/2 5 times 7. Okay, so now we just have to do some simple multiplication. And remember, we can multiply in any order we want. So I would probably think of 5 times 7 first. 5 times 7 is 35, and then I need half of that. Well, that is an odd number, so it's not going to divide evenly by 2. I am going to have a decimal or a fraction left over. So if I want half of 35, we multiply straight across, we would have 35 over 2, which means we're going to have to divide by 2. 2 will go into 3 once, with 1 left over. And then when I bring down my 15, 2 will go into 15 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. So I have 1 left over again. I can add a decimal point and a 0. 2 will go into 10 5 times. So that makes the area of this triangle, this right triangle, 17.5 square units, or units squared. Okay, triangle number 2. Same formula, it's really messy, so I'm not going to try to rewrite it. Area equals 1/2 base times height. There it is in a neater way. So you go ahead and fill that in. And then I want you to pause here and see if you can plug in the values to the equation on your own and solve for the area on your own. Hit play when you're ready to check. Okay, so you should have tried that math on your own. Our plug-in values would be area equals 1/2 14, because that's the base, times 16. When I do my math, I chose to go ahead and do 14 times 16 first. If you want to do it in a different order, remember that is fine. You should end up with the same answer as me. So when I did 14 times 16, I got 224. But don't forget that last part. You still need to multiply that by 1/2, which is going to mean you're going to divide by 2. So when I divide 224 by 2, I ended up with 112. And I made a mistake. I put units squared, but they did tell me a unit in this one. So I should have actually put inches squared. So I'm going to fix that really quick. The label is a very big part of area, volume, and perimeter problems, so don't leave that out. Okay, I want you to take a look at triangle 3. That one has a decimal in it, but it should be pretty easy. Go ahead and pause and try that one for yourself. Okay, let's check triangle 3. So when we plugged in our values, we should have gotten area equals 1/2 times 3.5, because that's our base. I use parentheses just to make it clear that we're multiplying, times 2. I did the math. I went ahead and went with our numbers to the right again first. 3.5 times 2 equals 7, and then I had to divide 7 by 2, and I got area as 3.5 meters squared. Now, you might have done it a different way, and I do want to show you a way that some of you have probably already started working these problems. So as we know with multiplication, the order does not matter. And it's been a little tricky on some of these problems because we've had an odd number to divide by. So if I started off here and I did 1/2 times 2 first, what's half of 2? Well, it's 1. So then my last step is 1 times 3.5, and that actually ends up being a lot easier. I don't want to confuse you. If you want to go in the same order for every single problem, that's great. But just know that you can manipulate it a little bit on certain ones to make it easier for you. Now, if I did this one, the first one that we did, half of 5 or half of 7 is not an easy thing to do. You're going to have a half or a 0.5 involved since those are odd numbers. So sometimes going ahead and doing the half with a number first is easier. Sometimes it's not. If I had done on example 2, half of 14 is 7, then I would just have 16 times 7 as my last step. And some of you might prefer to leave out that long division and work with smaller numbers when you're multiplying, because I know a lot of you, especially my pre-AP students, like to do mental math. You choose the way that works for you. The trickiest thing with triangles, though, is there's 3 things that you're multiplying. So a lot of mistakes are made. People will do the base times the height and they'll forget about going back and multiplying by 1/2. Or they'll do 1/2 times one of the pieces and forget the third piece. So just make sure you're going through all the steps of the formula before you stop and get your final answer. Okay, students, I've gone ahead and switched views for you guys. I know my writing got a little bit messy. This is the key made by the person who makes these worksheets, and she sets it up a little bit differently. So that's just another way that you can do it. She does this version of the formula, which is not on your star chart, but it definitely works, where you multiply the base and height first and divide by 2 as the last step. So that's just another look at how you can set it up. We're going to answer this question here at the bottom. What do you notice about the height of each of the triangles? So looking at our right triangle, here's our height. Other 2 triangles, the height is going through the middle of the triangle versus it just being one of the sides. But the most important thing when we're measuring height, and it's the same thing with a parallelogram, it needs to go straight down from the tallest point on the shape. So height is from the tallest point of the shape to the ground or the floor, if you imagine these shapes sitting on a table. For example, if you were measuring your height as a person, you wouldn't go from your shoulder down. You would go from the very top of your head straight down to the floor. Now we know a person is not a straight type shape. Your head curves into your neck and then you have your shoulders. But either way, we have to imagine a line going straight from the tallest point to the floor. So that is the same thing with these 2-dimensional shapes when you're looking at the height. So let me go ahead and uncover this because, oops, there is no way that I could write this neatly with my little pen on here. So the height of the triangle is how tall the triangle is, the tallest point. And the height is going to make a 90-degree angle with the base of the triangle. Now, sometimes that 90-degree angle will be marked for you and sometimes it's not. But if you see a dotted line like this going straight from top to bottom, you know that that is your height. Okay, students, I hope you have got everything down on your notes. If not, you can rewind any part of this lesson. Also, there is a key available on Canvas. So if you were unable to get everything, you have the key to the notes right here. Have a great day.